Hi, this is Ellen out at Severson Dalles Nature Center, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about who's using our Bluebird nest boxes. You might think that because they are Bluebird nest boxes that only bluebirds would use them, but that's not so. There are several different species that might be using those nest boxes. Bluebirds are one of a group of birds that are what we call cavity nesters. So they are looking for a nest site that is inside something that's hollow, usually a tree. But after people started being here and putting up things like fence posts, farmers back in the old days used a lot of wooden fence posts. They would use those as well. But they're not the only birds that are going to do this. Now, some of our cavity nesters prefer to be in the woods, so they're not going to compete too much with the bluebirds who prefer the open grasslands. But other birds also like the grasslands. So whose nest is in our boxes? Let's start first with the bluebird nest. How do you know if it's a bluebird? Well, bluebirds, they make a nice deep cup that's made out of fine grasses. There might be some feathers in there, not usually, but there could be feathers or even fine rootlets in that nest. The bluebird's eggs are a powder blue, very much the same color as a robin's eggs. Now, another bird that you might find commonly using our bluebird nest boxes is the tree swallow. Tree swallows are bright white underneath, and they're kind of a metallic blues with purples, or depending on how the light hits it. They have a forked tail, and they can be aggressive guarders of those nest boxes. If you have a bird dive bombing you when you're walking by a nest box, it's probably going to be a tree swallow. Now, the tree swallow's nest is also made of grasses, but it's a little bit flatter. It's not quite the deep cup that the bluebird nest is. So it's a little bit flatter, and it's going to have a lot of feathers in it. Anecdotally, they say that the tree swallows, the female won't lay an egg until there's at least one white feather in her nest. I've talked to people who have told me that they've stood out there with chicken feathers and held them up, and the swallows will steal the chicken feather from them and go and put it in their nest. That's kind of a fun thing to do if you live on a farm. You've got chickens and you've got bluebirds or tree swallows nesting by. Give it a try. This is the time of year to do it, and see if you can get them interested in stealing a chicken feather from you. The tree swallow eggs are going to be white, so they're not blue, they don't have any speckles on them, they're just plain white, maybe a little creamy colored, so they'd be very easy to tell from a bluebird's eggs. The next bird that might be using your nest box is the black-capped chickadee, especially if your nest box is closer to the edge of the woods. Chickadee nests are going to be a lot of moss, almost predominantly moss. So it's a very soft nest full of moss. It might have a little bit of fur in it, maybe some other plant fibers, but it's going to be bright green mosses. You won't be able to mistake it. The eggs are white and have brown speckles, and they're small because the chickadee is a small bird. House wrens are another bird that will be using these nest boxes, and you won't be able to mistake their nest for anybody else's nest. You open that box up and it's going to be packed full of sticks and twigs. That'll be a house wren. You might see some fine fibers or maybe some feathers in it, but it's a messy, twiggy mass inside that nest box. The eggs are going to be small and glossy white, although sometimes they might have a pinkish cast to them, and they have lots of specks that can range anywhere from pink to pinkish brown, reddish brown, plain brown. And the speckles on the fat end of the egg often will form almost a solid ring. So that makes the house wren's eggs really easy to identify if the twiggy nest didn't give them away already. Male house wrens are also notorious for building multiple dummy nests. So if you've got multiple nest boxes, they might stuff them all full of twigs. And then the female chooses the one that she likes the best. So that could happen as well. The tufted titmouse is another one that is a cavity nester, and like the chickadee, it has a nest that is made out of mosses and maybe some fur or some other soft plant fibers. And apparently, from what I've been reading, they're notorious for being full of earwigs. So if you've got a mossy nest there and you're thinking, is it a chickadee nest? Is it a tufted titmouse nest? If there's earwigs, you might want to be leaning more towards it being a titmouse. The eggs, again, are white and they're speckled, but the speckles are more of a rose or a mauve color. So that's something else to look at. Again, whereas the chickadees have brown speckles. Now, another bird that will be using these nest boxes is the house sparrow. House sparrows are an invasive species. We do not want to be encouraging them to use these nest boxes. And you'll know you've got a house sparrow if you open that nest box up and it is just stuffed full of anything possible. It could be trash, it could be fabric, it could be plastic, it could be twigs, it could be grasses, it could be horsehair, any number of things. It's just going to be jam-packed full. The hole is going to be on the side. The eggs can be cream colored, they could be white, they could be gray, or even a little bit greenish, and they have irregular brown speckles on them. Now the thing is, because house sparrows are an invasive species, they're not protected by law, and you can get rid of that nest, you can remove the eggs and dispose of them. Again, they're an invasive species. We do not want to be encouraging them to be nesting on the landscape. Now the other kind of nest you might find, especially at the end of winter, is a mouse nest. And it's going to be a messy, soft bundle of stuff just stuffed right in there. Now if you're monitoring your Bluebird boxes and you've removed the nest from last fall, the box should be empty. So if you come back in the winter or the spring and you see there's a nest in there, it's going to be a mouse nest. So as you can see from these pictures that we've been showing you, that with a little practice, it's pretty easy to tell whose nest is whose. And remember, with the exception of the house sparrow, these birds, their nests and their eggs are protected by law. So you can't harm them, you can't collect them, you can't keep them, but you can get rid of anything that does belong to a house sparrow. So I hope this video has been informative to help you learn how to identify the nests of the birds that are using your nest box. And if you are monitoring your nest boxes, this will help you keep track of whose nest is whose.